Greetings loyal subscribers and honoured guests. Here we are again, now up to episode 12, and we have another packed tape to look at. There are 3 full games and a playable demo for one of the hot new releases of 1990 to take a look at this time. Before we do that, let's take a quick look at the cover and see what else was going on in the world of Zzapped. Golden Axe was finally reviewed and given a score of 96%, and it is a pretty impressive version of the coin-op, despite the player facing off against enemies one at a time and the lack of a 2-player mode. It did feature a stonking soundtrack thanks to the legend that is Jerome Tell. There was also a show report from CES 1990 which included updates on the C64 GS launch, the CD-TV, and much more besides. Now let's get on with taking a look at the goodies on this tape. We kick things off this time with Rim Runner from Palace Software, which is famous for the creature that strongly resembles a Tauntaun from The Empire Strikes Back, who is prominently featured both on the front cover and in the game itself, with the ant-like creature sat astride it. According to the Zzapped review, the Tauntaun creature is a runner and the ant guy is from the insectoid race, and it is their task to travel to long-dead planets and attempt to colonise them. They are at war with the Arachnoids though, who will attempt to stop them at every turn. It's your job to maintain the shield generators on the various colony planets in order to repel a potential invasion from the Arachnoid forces, and you do this by killing any hostile creatures that have managed to penetrate the barrier. Generators that needs to be charged show up in red on your radar and you have to get off your runner in order to charge them back up. The Zzapped review crew for this game were made up of Steve Jarrett and Gordon Houghton. Both of them were initially impressed with Rim Runner in terms of presentation and technical achievement, although they both agreed that the game was too simplistic in terms of gameplay and it quickly grew boring. Steve remarked, "Unfortunately, it's more of a rolling demo than a playable game." Whereas Gordon commented, "The big letdown comes in the easy gameplay." They ended up awarding the game an extremely average score of 56% and concluded, "A polished, original and beautifully presented programme ruined by little diversity." I found that my own opinion didn't quite match up to those of the Zzapped reviewers. I found the game more challenging than they did and more interesting too. After multiple attempts I still hadn't managed to successfully complete level 1 within the time limit, although I did come quite close on my last attempt. After I had properly got the hang of things, I had no problem getting off my runner and recharging a drained shield generator, but if they were already under attack then I couldn't seem to prevent them from going red no matter how many enemies I killed. I believe I may be missing a vital detail because no matter how hard I tried, I just didn't have enough time to make it to all of the generators and stop one from being red by the time the timer expired. I thought the gameplay was quite good fun though, and the presentation was indeed as good as Zzapped stated it was. All in all, a solid game that might deserve a slightly higher score than 56%. We now move on to our second full game, which is Thunder Force, originally released in 1987 on Hewson's Racket label. It would seem that this game really isn't very good. You are swarmed by enemies that are colour-swapped clones of your character, and at first you can just punch them. No matter how many you kill, they just keep coming, though if you can avoid being hit, your energy will slowly recharge. You have to keep scrolling to the right in order to make any progress. It all feels like quite a slog, to be honest. Eventually I did find a gun on the wall which I was able to collect by jumping. From then on it was much easier to manage the enemies as they died in one shot, and I made it to a mid-stage boss. It wasn't too tricky to avoid the shots coming from this robotic thing, so I managed to defeat it, and the stage continued to scroll on for a while longer before coming to an end. Stage 2 then continued in much the same vein as the first, except with a different coloured background. I didn't make it too far into it before I got a game over. Occasionally, as well as the standard human clone enemies, there are sledges that need to be jumped over or it's an instant death when they hit you. This is what eventually took my last life. If you're going to give this game a try, I strongly suggest you turn the music on instead of the sound effects, as the punching sound gets incredibly annoying very quickly. The music is at least decent. The swarming enemies mean that Thunder Force isn't very enjoyable to play, and I highly doubt that I will ever go back to it. It looks like Zzapped never actually got around to reviewing this one, but if they had, I don't think they would have been very kind to it. Now let's flip over to side B, where we can find the only playable demo for this episode. It's a really good one though. Swiv was developed as a spiritual successor to the extremely popular coin-op Silkworm, and it takes the same idea of a helicopter and a jeep going into combat and transports it from a horizontal perspective to a vertical one. I believe this was a 16-bit game first, with the lead platform being the Amiga, before it was converted over to the 8-bit computers later, though I could be mistaken. If you own a Super NES, then you may also recognise this game under the name Firepower 3000. Swiv on the C64 may lack the finesse and polish of the Amiga and SNES versions, but the playability is fully intact and the game just feels incredibly fun and slick to play. The same levels have made it over to the C64 pretty much in full. This demo version was single player only and just lets you try out the helicopter for a bit on the first level, but that's okay. It starts off with a few questions that if you get right, you get some extra bonuses like more lives and powered up weaponry. It's a pretty generous demo all in all because the level is quite long. Definitely plenty there for you to decide if you want to try the full game. Our old friend Robin was a bit disappointed in the C64 version compared to the Amiga. He thought it was quite polished and offered plenty of playability, but it was a shame the game starts off in a drab desert level when they got considerably more interesting later on with environments such as volcanoes. He also thought that the Jeep wasn't really a viable option, and I do agree with that in single player mode. If you team up with another skilled player then it's much easier though. Overall, his thoughts can be more or less summed up with: C64 Swiv is good fun but isn't startlingly different from a horde of similar games. Stuart generally echoed those thoughts in his summary, saying that the neat little details and the extra layer of polish present in the Amiga version were missing from the C64 port. While the Amiga version scored 83% overall, which I still think is surprisingly low, the C64 version was given a rating of 76% and summed up with: slickly implemented, very playable shoot-'em-up fare, but nothing to set the world alight. It seems I have rather fonder memories of Swiv compared to the Zzapped staff. Maybe it's because a lot of the really big shoot-'em-ups that C64 owners rave about passed me by, so I was more impressed by the ones I did play. We conclude this episode with another full game in the form of Zork from Infocom. My lack of patience and affinity for text adventures has been well documented by this point, but this is considered to be one of the true benchmarks of the genre, so I'm going to try very hard to appreciate it for what it is and give it a fair shake. The first time I loaded up the Zork file that I had in my Zzapped folder, I got to a forest clearing with some leaves and picked up the leaves to find a grate. I then tried to open the grate and the game had an internal error. I also noticed that this is Mini Zork, which is a cut down version with less puzzles, so I'm not sure if this is actually the correct version that Zzapped gave away or not. My guess is that it is, because it fits on a tape and the full version of Zork has to be on a disc. When I loaded the game up again, I went a different way, entered a house through an open window and proceeded to steal and eat the food that was in the kitchen. Then I found a nasty knife and some rope down in the basement, as well as a lantern, and left the same way I came in. I eventually got to a canyon and didn't make it much further than that. This being an Infocom game, the text parser was pretty good at understanding what I was trying to do, and given time I might actually enjoy this game. I didn't really play it for long enough to actually encounter any puzzles though. I'm guessing that if I had managed to open that grate, I would have needed the lantern and the rope, etc. to proceed. I'm not certain. I would need to spend a lot more time with the game than I was able to right now though. The Zzapped review of Zork dates all the way back to issue 4 of the magazine from Whitey's adventure game section. He covered the entire trilogy in a single dense review, and it's fair to say he loved the series. Here are some of his thoughts on the first game. Zork is packed full of excellent and atmospheric descriptions, some superb fight sequences, responses, and above all a very wide vocabulary. Puzzles are numerous, tough, and sometimes humorous, and overall make this a difficult and enjoyable adventure to crack. The trilogy as a whole earned a score of 92% from Whitey, somebody who is much more qualified to speak on their quality than I am. So if you have never tried a text adventure, then these, or any by Infocom, would be a great place to start. And that brings us to the end of another episode. There's going to be one more to come for this current season, and then I'm going to take a bit of a break for about 2 months maximum. When I come back, I might have a different background image and music. I haven't quite decided yet. What do you think? Keep them the same all the way through the series or shake things up a bit? Let me know. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to be kept up to date with future videos. I'll be continuing my journey in 2 weeks' time, so I hope you will join me then. In the meantime, take care.